This is a production of WTVI PBS Charlotte.
Some homeowners are crying foul over a tentative deal to erase millions in NASCAR Hall of Fame debt. Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools releases emails, but do they really tell us much about the superintendent's abrupt departure and what a season it has been for the Panthers? Those topics and more on this Off the Record. We're glad you're with us this evening. I'm Jeff Rivenbark. My guests this week include Tom Bullock with WFAE FM, Erik Spanberg with the Charlotte Business Journal, Mark Garrison with WBT Radio, and B. Thompson with WBAV 101.9 FM. Thank you for being here. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Really? Want to make sure they find you on the dime.
You're right there.
First topic up today, Charlotte City Council is expected to vote Monday on a deal to erase more than $17 million worth of loans and interest the city owes for the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Under the proposal, the city will make a one-time cash payment of $5 million to Bank of America and Wells Fargo. The banks will erase $3.5 million in interest and another $14.1 million in principal. Now, many homeowners are wondering, wait a minute, I needed some help to save my home, and why are you giving the city a break? Erik, I know you've been following this quite a bit.
Well, I guess for homeowners, if you put Richard Petty's car in your den, maybe that would help. I don't know. This has been a long-running soap opera here in town. The many financial struggles of the NASCAR Hall of Fame, I don't think it's much of a surprise. They've never hit their projections in terms of attendance or financially, and so the banks had no recourse loans, which means they couldn't take anything back, and so they really have no choice. The funny thing is that the loans that we're talking about right here, Jeff, are backed by sponsorship sales, which have been, fairly meager, and the commemorative bricks. So literally,
so much for that. Nobody wanted them, apparently.
Well,
Nobody
actually,
wanted the
they're
bricks.
throwing bricks.
Yeah, they're throwing bricks.
Concept.
Yeah, they're brick bats everywhere. So I don't know. I mean, my idea for the Hall of Fame is maybe we turn it into a library because it's a nice, quiet place where you can go.
Since there's nobody there.
The thing that made me just kind of laugh out loud and shake my head was somebody from one of the banks said, well, we think this is a good thing to do because it helps the community. And I'm like, what? There are more people who go to yard sales in Matthews on Saturday morning than go to the Hall of Fame. So how is this good for the community in any way, shape, size, or form? Plus, I'll tell you, if you've ever had a small business loan and tried to get one of these bozo banks to give you even any marginal look at a refi or a change of terms, they're like loan sharks. And so this is maddening, I think, for people.
Well, help the community is a catchphrase that's used whenever any organization goes before local government asking for assistance. This isn't the first time we've been at this kind of party and you had no dance partner. Try the Whitewater Rafting Center. Same thing. Both of these organizations came forward, asked for public dollars, gave all these wonderful, we're going to bring so many people to Charlotte. We're going to bring so much money to Charlotte. It's going to be fabulous. Neither one of them has followed through. And as a homeowner, I would be highly upset. You're not going to forgive my debt, but you're going to ask me for my tax dollars to help forgive someone else's debt. To me, council and local government needs to take a closer look when organizations come and ask you for money. Oh, can I name a third one? And at least they didn't give them any money. The movie makers who wanted Eastland Mall.
Oh, that scam at Eastland. Wow.
Often
But they almost did. I mean, they trotted Angie
Right.
Harmon out and tried to...
That didn't make
Don't get me
sense.
started.
B, you bring up a really good point. And just on Friday morning, the Charlotte Chamber released an email in which Charlotte Chamber President Bob Morgan was touting the NASCAR Hall of Fame as a great example of a private-public partnership, and part of what we sell as we go about the business of promoting Charlotte for additional jobs and investments. So what do you say to that argument? We got to shore up the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Horse manure?
Yeah. Well, I'd say here's one of the problems, and I think it was Ed Driggs that mentioned this the other day. Here's the problem beyond the Hall of Fame, and it goes to the Whitewater Center and other things, is Charlotte likes to do these public-private partnerships. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem with it is when you have these rosy projections and you promise profits, as both of those centers did, and you say we're not going to need additional subsidies, that gets you the funding. That gets it through the system. And then you come back a couple of years later and you say, oh, slow down. This isn't going to work. And so how can voters trust any of these pitches as you do this time and time again?
Why can we not put requirements on corporations and entities that ask for public dollars the same way I would have a requirement if I got a loan. If I default, I've got to pay that money
Well,
back.
remember, B,
and they
this
don't
is
care.
the city we're talking about.
That's
I mean,
right.
It's not like some outside group borrowed the money.
And that's
this
my
is
point.
the city.
It's the city and it's the public's dollars. And you have got to look closely at how you're doing this. If we're saying dollars are shrinking, we don't have as much to work with, you cannot accept someone or an organization that comes in, everybody's in suits, everybody looks fabulous, and nobody, as the emperor, had any clothes on because there's no profit coming
And
out
remember
of
Are
it.
you
political will.
surprised, though, that the banks did this deal originally with no recourse, knowing
No.
that they would
And
get
did we,
stuck
the public,
potentially?
know that would be the case?
You have to go back and look at when the loan was made.
Right.
The loan was made at the time when it was the height.
2006 is when the whole thing was
Yeah,
awarded.
well, that's true.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't guarantee it, but I would be shocked if the city of Charlotte ever gets another, no collateral loan.
Yeah.
And you brought up Driggs. I think he made actually a pretty important point, which is why would the banks do this? I mean, you're talking about $20+ million, but they had nothing. The city hadn't made a single payment in 4.5 years, not one penny. Now, of course, if we ever did that to a bank, they'd be coming with pitchforks and
My point
Right.
And
exactly.
remember this. Remember, this is in the weeds a little bit, but it's an important point, which is there's a 2% hotel room tax that's going to pay off the majority of this construction. And we've been told over and over again that it is producing more revenue than expected.
surplus.
There's a surplus. And so one route could have been to go to the state legislature and say, allow us to use some of this money to pay back the loan. And they chose not to do that. So that tells you where we are.
It is interesting. There was a Charlotte Observer article this week in which Ralph Kettner, who was the co-founder of Food Lion, sent an email to Brian Moynihan, who is with Bank of America this week, and he said, please, before giving any part of the $19.1 million, think of your obligation to your shareholders and do the right thing by trying your best to collect the monies due your bank and its shareholders, or even the shareholders are a little bit.
But I always thought that argument was a little weak. I mean, again, they had no collateral for the loan. They had no claim onto any piece of property. Apparently, these negotiations have been going on now for at least a year.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that both banks did everything they possibly could to at least get something for it. And they end up getting $5 million split between the two of them, which is better than what they could have gone and claimed, which
and
is
Tom, remember
zero.
this. Remember this, okay? As we look at Bank of America in this particular case, $60 billion. That's with a B
Yeah.
on Countrywide. Okay, so whatever the number is.
Let me
just-
ask this question. In this case, is it the same with other bank quote unquote write-offs? Was that a possibility all along that if this didn't work from a banking and a financial standpoint, they can write off loans to a certain extent and take that off your taxes, and they will still get something back through the logos and all that grand stuff. How do you put a dollar figure on that? But it does make me wonder, was that always something in the back pocket that if everything goes south, we can still write off part of this and we don't lose
I
as
don't
much?
think that the banks wanted to take a bath on this. I mean, I don't think that they'd rather have the money and the interest. And I think they were counting on it because, again, this happened in 2006. Remember, NASCAR was very different in 2006. The sport was really booming. Attendance was up, TV ratings, and it looked like it was just going to keep doing this. Instead, it went just like that. So I don't think they did this intentionally. And I think with the Whitewater Center, it was a similar thing. Remember, when the Whitewater folks first went to the city, they promised a 20% profit, including paying down the debt.
Right.
They never paid any of the principal. So that's our banking lesson.
But the one thing I would say about the Whitewater Center, in fairness, is yes, they had to wipe off all that debt. You're absolutely right. But now they are turning a profit. Even with this move, the NASCAR Hall of Fame is projected only to lose between $200,000 and $500,000 a year for the foreseeable future.
That's true. I guess my problem with even the Whitewater Center is if you go through my meager family budget each month and you take away my mortgage, well, life would look pretty good.
And that's part of my point. The average rank and file individual that you expect to go to these locations and help them to meet their bottom line, they got a budget into their monthly. Can I afford to do that? I think we should ask ask the same thing. If you are asking for public dollars, you need to be able to stand up and meet a budget the same as the rest of us. If I don't meet my budget, my creditors do not say, it's okay, B, come back next week.
Or
They
let's
don't do
make the
that.
case, and I know they'll never do this. This is a pipe dream. Or let's make the case that this is something that is worth it, even though it's not going to be financially profitable. Because everything's not profitable.
Yeah.
Mass transit's not profitable, but they talk about the spin-off
Then
development. and
don't
those things.
sell it to me on a
Right.
profit.
That's
well,
exactly
and to
right.
that point, I think many city leaders are saying it is important to keep the NASCAR Hall of Fame here because it establishes our connection with NASCAR. And if we lose that, then we could potentially lose other businesses that are part of that
And you
industry.
can't
Does that
close
even
it
make-
down.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. I mean, now that it's here, you have
It's
to do
here,
it.
you
But
have to do it.
I would think that the giant track, albeit now that's 40,000 or some odd seats smaller, that's not too far away from the city, is a better anchor to NASCAR for most fans in the Hall of
Absolutely.
Fame.
Because it makes it
absolutely.
convenient for them. For people who are coming here for races, they may not necessarily want to come to Uptown Charlotte. And that was the whole thing. We want those tourism dollars to come to Uptown Charlotte. Now, I want us to have things that will bring people to our area. All I'm saying is this. Do not sell us a boondoggle as the public on the dollars. And a couple of years later, I see these same people coming back saying, didn't work quite the way we thought. We need a few
and here's
more.
the other problem, and this happens so often in the public sector. The group of people dealing with this problem is not the group of people that
created it.
approved it,
Right.
that created it. And so they're going to catch a lot of heat for things that they really didn't do. Even at the Visitors Authority. Remember, Tim Newman was running the Visitors Authority when all this happened, and now it's Tom Murray. By the way, our current governor, who was mayor at the time, was one of the biggest cheerleaders for this project. Everybody was. So
Let's ask him for some money.
All right, well, let's move on to our next topic. It's only the first full week of January, and everyone this week has been talking about the cold weather. According to the National Weather Service, Charlotte tied its record low temperature of 8 degrees Thursday morning at Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Hopefully, you're home, cozied up by the fire tonight while you're watching us, but think about all the homeless who are outside with no place to go. This week, Charlotte's urban ministry announced a coalition to raise nearly $12 million to house hundreds of homeless people within 2 years. The director of the urban ministry says there are about 450 chronically homeless people in Charlotte, and that's only 10%, he says, of the homeless people in Charlotte. Are we doing enough in Charlotte for our homeless neighbors?
I think we probably need to do more than what we're doing, but how do you do the balance and where do the dollars come from? Each year there's a national count, a point-in-time count of the homeless, and different organizations, it's usually around end of January, end of February, they go out one night and they count the number of homeless people, where they're living under bridges or with someone else, to see how many in an area. And the numbers have been going up. You could say if you do more for homeless in an area, will you attract others to that area? But if you don't, then what happens? A lot of the businesses in Uptown or various areas will say, we don't want them sleeping right here in front of my business. I don't want them to get to the
Main
point.
libraries had a lot of problems.
We don't want them to get to the point where they're accosting people. Now you're seeing homeless people in areas you didn't see them before, in the university area. I don't know if they've run homeless people out of Ballantyne or just told them, look, wait until after dark before you start walking. But if we don't handle this, then what happens? You exponentially have more problems because somebody didn't have any place to go.
Well, I'd like to see these banks that were so generous to write off money for the Hall of Fame to maybe step up and help contribute to this project. It's interesting to me that Charlotte's Center City Partners spearheaded a campaign to push restaurants uptown not to feed the homeless. Don't feed them.
Don't
feed
forget
them.
their anti-panhandling move.
That's
I mean,
right.
and the benches.
So,
Well, you don't want people to feel uncomfortable when they're uptown, but maybe we as a community need to feel uncomfortable with the whole homeless
absolutely.
aspect. So
And
we'll
I
do
think-
something about it.
I think one of the interesting things about, look, this debate's been going on forever, this problem's gone on forever. No one, I think, wants people to be homeless, right? We all agree on the basics here. But I think that not only is it complex, but I think that sometimes the argument needs to be made not just in a moral sense, but in a pragmatic financial sense, because sometimes that hits people in a better place. And it goes to what B's saying is, if you don't deal with it, it's more expensive. With all the repercussions.
Which is absolutely right. But here's my problem with this. I think this is a laudable plan. I think this is a great idea. But in my brief time in Charlotte, I've heard plans to end chronic homelessness, make sure there's not a single homeless veteran. I've heard all kinds of different plans. Everybody likes to make these announcements. But as with other announcements, we have no details. Where is the money? You were right. It'd be nice to see the banks help out in a situation like this, Mark, but where's the money coming from?
That's right.
They don't know. They hope to find it. Where is it going to be built? They don't know. They hope to find it. It seems it's a laudable, it's a goal, but it's nothing more at this point. And I actually fear we have so many announcements about these kind of grand goals that everybody assumes that it's all taken care of until the next grand goal comes out.
And all taken care of because out of sight, out of mind. A lot of people don't necessarily want you to know that they are homeless or this is where they have to live, so they stay out of the public eye. This happens more often with women and children, and yet that's one of the growing proponents of the homeless here in Charlotte. I think it may fall upon us as representatives of the media to maybe go back. You know how we do fact checking when it's political season? Is what they said in their political ad correct? Maybe we need to all go back to all these press conferences we're invited to a year or two down the road and go, so what happened?
Yeah, I'm a little torn on this one because I agree with you. I'm very skeptical because there is not a lot of meat on the bone. At the same time, I understand one of the important things here is for people to be talking about it. So having a press conference is not
It's a start.
It's a start, but I did find it curious that there was a 2-year goal as though this, I mean, it just seems... Look, it would be great if homelessness was ended in Charlotte in 2 years, but that just seems, impossible.
Well, and also along with think about just the construction side of it. We're gonna build 450 units in 2 years.
Yeah,
that would be probably close to a record.
But if they do it, I'm
like
happy to say I was wrong.
Well, that sounds like a hotel that's not being used that could be converted for the moment as temporary shelter to bridge you from homelessness, temporary shelter, till we get some things built where we can put people who are homeless. But you got to watch that temporary shelter because somebody's going to say, I don't want that hotel in my backyard.
Right. This is so complex. It really is, because while everyone has good intentions, then all of a sudden, when, like you were saying, when it's in your backyard, all of a sudden people are, oh, wait, maybe we should move it over here. So this is going to take a lot of talk and a lot of actual doing and action.
And in the meantime, there are a lot of cold people out on the streets. I wish at that press conference the other day they might have had some churches there who were opening some gyms, which they do from time to time, especially in really cold weather. But it seems like there needs to be a short-term plan and a long-term plan.
Well, and also, too, caring for the homeless is more than just providing a place for you to sleep.
True.
I mean, these folks need services to try
Mental
to
health.
get over some issues that they're dealing with.
And
So maybe they can get acclimated
Counseling,
back.
Yeah, and that's
healthcare.
actually what more places done and done successfully. And in the long run, if you actually look and run the numbers, it is significantly less expensive for a community to have something like More Place in place than it is to continually give services as they come up.
And that's where the public relations campaign really needs to hit.
Needs to step up, because most people, if you think about it, I would argue most people can see about 18 months into the future financially. This is much longer time frame than that, and so I don't think a lot of people grasp the savings, but they need to be shown the savings in a tangible
But
way.
until there is an actual pot to pull that money from, until there is business, private sector, public sector pulling together and say, here's the money, and this is what we need to do. Because right now what we have is a conglomeration of various organizations saying, okay, this would be good, okay, that would be good, but who takes the lead on it and actually moves forward?
Might
That's
be a
where we are.
project for the incoming United Way director.
It just might be.
In other news, also this week, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools released hundreds of emails that show friction between top CMS staff working for former Superintendent Heath Morrison and the attorney who led an investigation into him. I know WFAE, Tom, did a report this week. Did we really learn anything from these emails about what was going on or why he left?
Well, I encourage everybody to listen to Lisa Worf's report. I thought it was quite good. I don't know. I mean, the short of it is you feel that you can definitely sense a lot more. You know the tension's there. We already kind of knew that from what everybody's saying, but between, Heath Morrison, the former superintendent, and Battle, the lawyer, you can tell there's frustration. I mean, there's this really interesting email where it looks like the superintendent side of the house is trying to get influence over the legal side, and George Battle says basically, trying to work with team members has been ridiculous, and
And I work for the board, not for you.
which is a fact. And the superintendent should not have any ability over my budget or any influence over my budget, or else I should have influence over his. I mean, clearly these two guys did not play well together. But, so far, and we're still going through the emails, I have yet to see a real kind of trend on the bigger issue. It's not about the personalities. It's really, in many ways, about this magnet school at the university, UNC Charlotte, that it looks like, by all accounts, Keith Morrison just wanted to brush the cost overruns under the rug and pretend like they weren't happening there. And we're not talking about a little cost overrun.
It was a lot of money.
We're talking $35,000 projected to what, $1.3 million actual.
And in a system that was looking at taking teaching assistants out of classrooms with teachers, putting more students in classrooms with teachers, and doing every kind of thing and saying you're cutting costs, but this was something that most folk didn't know about. I've got major questions because it makes me very suspect of how you're doing that budget. All of these children, all of the needs that they're asking for in the classroom that they can't get, and you're playing around with something that maybe shouldn't have been there in the first place. Every parent ought to have some questions about just how that money's spent. If you are going into a school and you see your school has needs, and you as a parent or a supporter is constantly doing this, and then you hear this story about cost overruns on something that should not have happened, you need to be suspect.
Important programming note, though. I think Charles Dickens envies a lawyer named Battle.
Funny. Sad news earlier this week. We learned about Stuart Scott's death. The well-known ESPN Sports Center anchor died after a long battle with a rare form of cancer, and he had some strong ties with North Carolina. He went to high school in Winston-Salem, Mount Tabor area, went to UNC Chapel Hill for college. First TV job was in Florence, South Carolina, and ended up at WRAL in Raleigh. A lot of people are describing Stuart Scott as a trailblazer. In what way do you see him as a trailblazer?
I think not just because of the booyah, all of you sports folks know that, but because of his demeanor, the method in which he approached not only sports, but providing information in general. One of the first big interviews he did was with President Obama. That was something that was non-sports, but he was able to bridge both areas in doing so. His allegiance to North Carolina, even though he was born somewhere else, this was home. He was going to be a Tar Heel till all else was over. But more than anything else, he showed people how to be graceful in being not only someone who brought forth information, but was a fun person too, and he never gave up. Even at one point when they told him the cancer was in remission, and several years later, the cancer comes back. He never gave up.
Well,
He
let's
kept
remember
pounding.
also, B, that when he went to ESPN in, I guess, the early 90s, the way Stuart Scott spoke, the way he brought African-American culture into ESPN, which was as lily white as any institution
As
in
MTV
America.
was.
And
Yeah.
remember, there was a backlash against Stuart Scott. There were a lot of people like, hey, why is this guy talking about the cooler side of the pillow and booyah and all this stuff? And then all of a sudden he became one of their most popular anchors. So he really did change the language of sports.
Well, which I think, I love the guy. I loved watching him, and I think he is a great argument for why television needs to get away from this paradigm of having nothing but stick-skinned blondes, stick-skinny blondes. That's all they put on television anymore.
Hey.
I go back in the newsroom at Channel 3 in the building where I work, and I'm like, they're running a home for sickly girls back there. Come on. Let's put some real people with real personality on television. And I think he was a trailblazer in that
Exactly.
standpoint. He was himself.
And to that point, one of my interns actually pointed out this week, Asia, she's African American. She pointed out, she says, people of my generation actually saw him as, that he's one of the reasons why she wanted to go into broadcasting. And when I look back at my reality, my role models were, David Brinkley, Tom Brokaw, Walter Cronkite. They're all white guys. So Stuart Scott was an African American who made it and was a huge role model for a younger generation. So
He was also a great journalist, just
Right.
full on great. I mean, I grew up in Utah. I watched the game when Michael Jordan, and as a former Jazz fan, pushed off of, made a shot, Bryant Russell, just out of my way a little bit. And one of the greatest moments in journalism, in sports, I would say, and it sounds so simple, is this. It was Stuart Scott that directly asked Michael Jordan whether or not he pushed off. It was years later because it was the first time anybody could really talk to him. He was the one who asked the direct question that all journalists should ask, like to the point. The way
See,
he asked it.
only another Tar Heel could go to China in this case.
Yeah, thank you.
That's
Thank
right.
you.
That's right.
Anybody else, back up.
All right,
But yes.
on a more positive note, the Carolina Panthers will take on the Seattle Seahawks this weekend. Carolina put on a solid performance last week against the Arizona Cardinals, winning the game 27-16. And man, what a season it has been. We've got the coach's house going up in flames.
Cam Newton in a wreck.
Cam Newton in a wreck, and then the problems that Greg Hardy has had. What do you think? How do you think they will perform this weekend?
Well, I think the best thing they could have done was to flood the practice field with the sounds of people from Seattle, just to get you ready. Because
It's
if
an
you
awful
were not
place to
ready
play.
for that, I'm telling you, I've been there, and it's
They
a
get
big
loaded up
old
on
bowl,
that
and they
coffee
make a
and
lot of
espresso,
noise,
and then-
and you can't hear anything in that stadium. So to do that and get them ready, but I am actually very proud of them. You know, a couple of weeks ago we talked about pedal pushers and all that good stuff. Well, he put on long pants and started playing. I think that's a fabulous thing.
You know,
And
I think the
they'll do
important
as
thing
well.
politically here is that the Seattle mayor has a much cooler package of things that
Yeah,
he's
the
offered.
Sub Pop.
Sub Pop
Oh,
and
great
vinyl
music,
and all this
yeah.
stuff. So I think that Clodfelter really needs a win here, so he can sort of bring that home. What did we offer? I can't remember.
I was going to say, are we
I think
sending
it was
barbecue?
tickets to the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
Please don't send. Please don't send.
Oh,
barbecue.
there you go.
Sometimes winning is losing.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, why not? Let's look at it. I mean, the worst team getting into the playoffs, the Panthers, is going up against the best team to go against into the playoffs, and you know they're playing them away. And what could possibly go wrong?
Well, we certainly wish them well, and that's all the time we have this week. Thanks to my guest, Tom Bullock with WFAE FM, Erik Spanberg with the Charlotte Business Journal, Mark Garrison with WBT Radio, and B. Thompson. Be sure to friend us on Facebook at WTVI Charlotte. We give away free stuff each month. I'm Jeff Rivenbark from all of us, maybe even some free tickets to the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Thanks for your support. Stay warm this weekend, and go Panthers.
A production of WTVI PBS Charlotte.